Long moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that House File Number 5084 be recalled from the Committee on State Government, Finance and Policy, be given its second, third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. We heard last night on the floor that the bills that you introduce matter and that signing on to bills matters as well. We have 14 members of this body who has signed on to a bill that would make abortion illegal in the state of Minnesota. And we have heard many times from Republican leaders, including those running for statewide office, that this is a settled issue in our state, that we have a state Supreme Court decision that protects reproductive rights for Minnesotans. But we see very clearly with this bill, House File 5084, that this is still a very live issue in this body, and that elections still very much have consequences that could determine the reproductive rights of Minnesotans. 2/3 of Minnesotans believe that abortion should be illegal, and yet House File 5084 would create a, quote, right to life, quote, from the moment of fertilization. This is as extreme an anti-abortion measure as we have seen proposed nearly anywhere in the country. It would criminalize decisions to terminate pregnancies except in narrow circumstances. It would potentially criminalize widely popular procedures that help many people get pregnant, including IVF. It would criminalize medical examiners as well for providing medical care, including potentially for miscarriages. And it could result in criminalization of adverse pregnancy outcomes, often before an individual even knows that they are pregnant, because this is, again, from the moment of fertilization. Minnesotans deserve access to health care. They overwhelmingly support reproductive rights. So members, I'd urge that we take a strong stand as a body and vote no on House File 5084. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Long, for your motion. I want to just, first of all, I just want to say, and as Leader Long said, that this is a settled issue in Minnesota, even if it's not settled everywhere. We know what the data says about support for reproductive freedom, bodily autonomy, and the right to an abortion. We would, like many other states, defeat this amendment soundly at the polls. Just as since the Dobbs decision came down, we saw states like, liberal bastions like Michigan and Ohio and Kansas and Montana all vote to protect abortion at the ballot, because this is a settled matter in the state of Minnesota. But I also just want to make sure we understand what it means to the people who live under states that have laws like this in place. There's many stories now that have come out since we have seen full, unmitigated abortion bans across the country. In Georgia last year, you might have heard the story of a 24-year-old woman who was arrested actually out of the hospital where she was recovering after she suffered a miscarriage. She passed out, she had a miscarriage, she was transferred to the hospital by loved ones, and while she was at the hospital, she was arrested for concealing the death of another person and for the abandonment of a human body. After the miscarriage, she had thrown the remains of her miscarriage into the garbage. So that was abandoning the human body, and then she was arrested. Eventually, those charges were dropped after much outcry, including from the coroner, who said this was a natural miscarriage. But that's a terrifying thing for a 24-year-old woman to go through, for any person to have to face. And then earlier this year, just in 2026 in Kentucky, a 35-year-old woman was arrested. She was charged with homicide and abuse of a corpse, as well as tampering with evidence after she had a self-administered abortion using mifepristone. And she ended up in jail. Those charges were also dropped. They were dropped because of the outcry. Because of the outcry of having individuals lose the right to their own body and having often men criminalize the ability to simply control your own life. These kinds of stories, these are just two. There are more, but there are more coming. There are more coming if we pass legislation like this, if we go into a world where suddenly people are not in control of their own life. What does it mean to be in control of your own life? It means being able to choose a family. If you want to choose a family through IVF, you know, this amendment would probably stop your ability to do that. That's what we have seen in other similar amendments, that if you are, for example, gay, and you want to have a child through IVF, you would take that right away. That's choosing family, and that's choosing, we would be choosing to take that right away. And if you are so inclined as to choose not to start a family, as we protect here in Minnesota, and as overwhelmingly the people of Minnesota want to see protected, we have to have that right too. So this is extremism, I mean radical extremism. Sometimes people say that about me, and I'm saying it this time about the other side. The idea that we would take full autonomy away from individuals, regardless of whether they're choosing to have a family or choosing to wait, it's extremism, and it's disgusting, and it's wrong, and the people of Minnesota reject it. They reject it outright, as this bill will be and forever will be in Minnesota. So thank you for your attention to this matter.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Long, for this opportunity to stand up both against violence against the most vulnerable individuals and for democracy, for the people of Minnesota to decide this important issue. This is an extraordinary issue of conscience, and it certainly is a settled issue in Minnesota law currently, and perhaps it is a settled issue in Minnesota public opinion. But members, every abortion is an act of violence. It's an act of violence against a distinct human being. That is what my conscience tells me, and I know this is a very important issue of conscience to many Minnesotans. And so certainly to stand against violence, to stand for conscience, and to stand for democracy, I certainly think we should go ahead and offer Minnesotans the ability to make their voice heard. Representative Finke, you may be correct in your assessment of the public opinion on this issue, but why should we be afraid of that? Why should we be afraid of allowing the people of Minnesota to make a decision about that issue? So I encourage members to vote their conscience on this very important issue of conscience.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. First of all, has there been a roll call requested? Roll
There has
call,
not.
please.
Roll call will be had, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So, members, this bill that the motion is concerning is a very extreme bill. I'm urging a no vote on the motion, just to be very clear. And we are bringing this up today to emphasize how very extreme members of the Republican Party are on this issue. Because if you look at the language of the bill is saying that unborn children have a right to life. And then there are some exceptions in the bill. So what the bill is really doing is it's presuming that anyone who has an abortion has committed murder unless they can show otherwise. So it is saying, it is making murderers out of many, many people in Minnesota who are choosing to control their own reproductive rights, and making them come forward and prove that the abortion that they had, or the miscarriage for that matter, that it meets the requirements of this amendment. So think about this, the ramifications of this are tremendous. There's been a lot of discussion in this body about IVF, about families that are unable to conceive and are using reproductive technologies to conceive, and they are creating embryos. And under this amendment, an embryo would have a right to life. Just think about that. A couple creates embryos, decides to dispose of those embryos for whatever reason, and now they've committed murder under this amendment. So I heard Representative Niska say, well, we want to give people the right to vote on this and decide. Well, I would argue that Minnesotans have decided. They've decided very strongly. They've voiced their opinions on this. And I would, it seems to me that many of the people, probably most people in Minnesota, are kind of glad not to have to be dealing with this issue again and continuously. But think about it. What a big government thing this is to do to people. Those of you who like small government, who want government to get out of people's business, boy, this bill puts government right in people's business in one of the biggest ways you can imagine, by making them murderers unless they prove otherwise. And another issue that, think about this, under the language of the amendment that would be proposed in this bill, there are some exceptions, but one of the exceptions that isn't there, think about this. A 10-year-old child can get pregnant. This has happened. Think about who this might impact. You could have a 10-year-old child who was raped. By definition, they don't get pregnant unless they're raped. Or a 12-year-old child, or, this happens. This happens actually with disturbing frequency. And under this amendment, that child would not be able to have an abortion without it being a murder. So you would be making, if a 10-year-old child can be charged with murder, maybe not, right, under current law, but, slightly older than that, and they're a murderer for having an abortion after being raped. Or maybe it isn't even a child. Maybe it's an older person, somebody who was raped and gets pregnant. Maybe they were raped by someone they're related to, and they become pregnant. And then what this amendment is saying is that person cannot have an abortion because it would be murder, because you are giving that fetus, even if it was fertilized one day ago, it now has a right to life. So this is a very troubling, very extreme bill, and I would think that even if you don't like abortion, even if you yourself would never have an abortion, the idea that you would take that decision away from the person who is experiencing the pregnancy and say, oh no, it should be murder unless that person proves otherwise under the narrow terms of this amendment, that's a very extreme position. People who are deciding how to control their own fertility, whether to use IVF to create a family, or deciding that they don't want to carry a pregnancy right now, those people are not murderers. And this is a very extreme bill, and I urge a no vote on the motion to suspend the rules.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about protecting life. Last week, members, my wife and I received the difficult news that we have lost a baby. We love that baby. We love the life that is created every single time that a baby is conceived. Every single time that a baby is conceived in Minnesota, that baby has life. That baby matters. That baby deserves protection under law. I am proud to be a co-author of this bill. I am proud to stand for life. I am grateful to be able to tell the story that every single human life matters. And that no matter the changes to law that happen across this land, that this caucus right here is going to stand for life. We're going to live a culture of life. We're going to walk it every single day. We're going to stand for life, for the value of every single life. And members, as we approach this discussion, it's sensitive. This conversation is meaningful. The life of the baby, the life of the mother, the life of the father, the life of the siblings of that conceived baby matter. And what this bill gives us an opportunity to do is to have the conversation with Minnesotans, to give them the choice. For them to have the decision at the ballot box to protect human life. That's what this bill does. It's so easy to support. It is so easy to support when you are saying that Minnesotans get to have their voice heard in the laws in this state. That's easy. This might be the easiest vote that I take this session. The simple, most easy, and yet most impactful and important vote to protect human life. So many of you have shared your story with me over the last week about how your family has faced the loss of a miscarriage. And this bill that we debate today, this bill that would give Minnesotans the choice as to whether or not we, together as a state, will protect life, this bill has the protection for my family, for my wife, and for every family that has experienced a miscarriage. That's what this bill does. And when we consider the important debates that we have, as we seek to live our faith, to live our values, and to set an example for future generations of Minnesotans, we have an opportunity to invite Minnesotans to be a part of that conversation, to defend every single human life. And I'm honored and blessed to be able to stand here today, grateful for the opportunity to vote yes and support every human life.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a difficult topic. I think the last time we talked about it was when it was a debate on a bill about late-term abortions. Our first child died in a miscarriage. But I remember when my youngest son started school, he had two friends. They were twins. They were great friends. And we got to know them in the family. If they had been born 4 years before, they would never have survived. They were very premature. When my grandson was born 6 weeks premature, we didn't get to see him for weeks because it was, there were concerns about exposing him to others. But his finger, the first picture we saw of him, he was sitting there, and my son's, the tip of his little finger, the baby had all 4 fingers wrapped on that. So tiny. I don't know if we didn't have the Mayo Clinic, if he would have survived. Life experiences are important in this debate. Understanding that people come from the experiences they have in life, and you can have different opinions on a topic, but don't throw away and not consider the life experiences that have defined how we feel and have developed on a topic. And those 2 boys that were very premature, I've seen pictures of their children now. And that's why I understand from my life experiences that that human being is a human being before the 9 months are up. And it's a difficult topic, but what's required when you have a topic like this is to listen and try and understand where the people come from and where they've gone through things. This is not a topic for, pomposity and bloviating one's opinion and another theirs. It's a topic where the first step is listening and understanding. Then as a body, we can make better choices considering that there are different experiences and outcomes and situations, and that a all or nothing doesn't take that into consideration. So I and many others are frustrated by the fact that a few years ago, it was basically up to the time of birth, and how that was upsetting to me and others. So we need to give seriousness to the serious topic because it impacts a lot of hearts, and I feel for you. It's a difficult situation. And that's how we need to approach these topics. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza-Wattoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does that Whitesnake song go? Here we are again, members and Minnesotans. We were called alarmist. We were called crazy. We were told that the overturning of Roe would never happen, but it did. And in response, Minnesotans elected the first DFL pro-choice majority legislature, and we moved under the leadership of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman with urgency to pass, and Governor Walz signed into law the Protect Reproductive Options Act in January of 2023, just before what would have been the 50th anniversary of the decision of Roe v. Wade. We live in a representative democracy, members. Minnesotans delivered a pro-choice trifecta because they don't want what happened to Roe to happen here. And now, after a very long campaign season in 2022 in which Republicans tried to tell Minnesotans that, oh, this is settled law, Doe v. Gomez is settled law, it's just the Supreme Court would, it's not an issue. That, of course, was a lie. And had Minnesotans delivered a GOP trifecta in 2022, I can only imagine where we would be right now. Republicans are now showing us that they won't stop in trying to take away our reproductive freedom and our bodily autonomy. There's been discussions, members, about how somehow God gave us the right to own guns. I don't think Adam and Eve had guns, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. I was born with a uterus, though. Sometimes it didn't work the way that it was supposed to when my husband and I were trying to conceive and grow our family. So I stand here before you as a mother of 4 who became a parent via foster and adoption and, by miracle, a biological pregnancy. But not all pregnancies are celebrations, members, and not all pregnancies end in a happy baby. And I am so grateful, Representative Schultz, that you shared the heartbreak that you and your wife have experienced so recently. Representative Reimer did the same in committee a couple weeks ago. I only was able to be pregnant once, and I never had to deal with that. And my heart goes out to everyone who has had to deal with that. And we have heard so many stories over the years from members here who have shared their own stories, who have shared stories of their constituents. The point is that this is not how we should do this. And it's really upsetting that we have to continue having this conversation, because there are those of us who have been warning and sounding the alarm for years and years and years. And now on Mother's Day, the Trump-Vance administration releases some crazy website called moms.gov, which is a glorified data collection website. And the first thing it does is send women to a crisis pregnancy center. They're not required to have medical practitioners at crisis pregnancy centers. This world, this dystopian society that we are living in and walking into is a nightmare. And it sounds like some of our Republican colleagues are going to make it very clear today that they don't care about settled court precedent, that they don't care that Minnesotans sent a DFL pro-choice trifecta to pass a law so that we couldn't overturn that Supreme Court precedent. And now they want to send a constitutional amendment back to Minnesotans to try to take away our bodily autonomy. We're not going to let that happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to probably say something right now that's going to be offensive to both sides of this body, because we do this all the time. We have these bills and these amendments that I call the gotcha bills and the gotcha amendments. And I don't blame you, because we did this to you yesterday, to my Democratic friends over there. And so we're going to go back and forth and lob these political bombs instead of getting the things done we can actually get done in this body that we agree upon. But I'm going to say a few things about life right now, because I believe in the inherent right to life of every human being in the womb out of the womb to the point of natural death. And I will gladly stand on that. I also understand the incredible decisions that have to be made and the very sad things that happen during pregnancies. I get that. We have to recognize that too. But we always recognize that that life inside a womb is precious. And I will never say that it's not, and it's a life. And I will just mention, and I'm not going to say the bill number, because I know we're not supposed to talk about other bills at this point, but this does relate because it talks about life. Some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have a bill, and there's 10 of them, that would basically give wild rice the inherent right to life in Minnesota. The wild rice plant. Recognize the inherent right of uncultivated wild rice to exist and thrive in Minnesota. So that evidently is going to be recognized, but not the child in the womb. And by the way, it is not extremism to promote democracy. And this particular amendment just brings the question to the voters. Democracy is not extremism. Voters should be able to choose that if we would choose to bring this up. But we know this is going nowhere. Because, I'll go back to the first statement I made, it's political game playing. It's political lobbying of bombs back and forth to try to get you, let's get some lit pieces. I say enough of that. I'm sick of it. I've been here 12 years. And we've almost gotten nothing done, and we need to get things done. So let's get to work for voters. Instead of lobbying these political bombs, we both do it. I acknowledge that. We did it yesterday to you. I'm sorry. And now you're doing it back to us. But who's just going to say stop it? So I'd like to say it. Please, stop it.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. This is a hard conversation because, of course, we all have a lot of personal interaction with this. I have also had the pain of miscarriage and been on that side of it at least 2 times. There were a couple times we couldn't confirm it, but we believe we did. One of those moments, we went to the doctor with a positive pregnancy test, excited about this, and we got the horrible news that the pregnancy wasn't visible, but even worse, the levels were still such that it showed potential pregnancy, which for those in here who had bad health education, as I did at that time, means that it is most likely an ectopic pregnancy, which is when the embryo implants not in the main cavity where it can grow in the uterus, but usually in the fallopian tube. In that case, that child is not going to survive. That most likely will continue to grow, cause the fallopian tube to burst. That will not only endanger the life of, in this case, my wife, the woman who is carrying, but will also make it more difficult in the future to conceive again. Under this bill, as it is currently written, ectopic pregnancies would not be able to be given treatment. We have seen that in other states. Even when you insert things like for the life of a mother, you have to wait until that life is actually in danger, so that embryo would continue to grow until you get to a dangerous point. Incredibly dangerous, members. And I do want to speak to this from a place of someone who once would have argued on that side of the aisle on this issue and is now on this side of the aisle. Obviously, we can't see it, but on the stream, there's going to be a chyron, and it's going to say I have my BA from Moody Bible Institute. You will not be shocked to learn that when I attended there, I was what you would call pro-life. I would have told everyone that I believed life began at conception. And this moment where we had a potential ectopic pregnancy and had to make very hard decisions was the start of my long journey to getting to this side of the aisle on this particular issue. Part of it was our infertility journey. Side note, there's a great bill that Carly Katiza-Wattoon has about IVF being affordable for Minnesota families that we should absolutely include in our Commerce Omnibus Bill that hopefully will come up soon after committee. But you learn about reproduction very quickly and in ways you didn't expect when you are dealing with infertility. This bill says that defines a human life as any time after conception. Do you all in this room who have signed your name to this or who believe in this, do you know how many embryos after conception survive in the womb? It's 30%. So according to the language of this bill, 70% of humanity never even implants in the womb and is naturally discarded by the body. And I'm a Christian. I really struggled with this idea. I couldn't conceive of a God who my foundational belief that life began at conception, 70% of humanity would just not be even given a chance. Struggled with this. I struggled with this. Do you know, by the way, after implementation, how many embryos survive in the womb? It's much higher, but it's still only 70%. So that's 70% of the already low 30% from the moment of conception. Slowly, you realize that that slogan that is thrown around, life begins at conception, is not something that we can just take at face value. It's not something that we can just throw around to win an argument. It is complicated. And I learned, and I truly believe this, we're not arguing about if an individual person should or should not have an abortion. That's not what our difference in belief is. Our difference in belief is who decides in that moment what medical care is received. The doctors and the people involved, or us in this room, or even the voters of Minnesota. It's a complicated issue, members. And it is incumbent upon us in complicated issues to have the hard discussions, not to throw around small phrases, not to talk about billboards, but to really dig in. And when we dig in, reproductive health care, reproductive freedom is important, it is complex, and it is not something that we should legislate, certainly not at the level of this extreme bill. We already know Minnesotans don't want this. But I'm talking to you as someone who used to believe as you did and is now here. We value life, the life of the mother, the life of the child. I mourn those miscarriages, the pain that others in this room know very, very well. We're not minimizing that. We are actually elevating that and giving the power to those who are in those incredibly difficult scenarios. They make the choices about their bodies, about their families, not us.
I recognize the member from Winona, Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're quickly reminded once again, Minnesota delivered a trifecta, and I assume in this case to support unrestricted abortion through birth. Talk about extremism, that's what's been brought up here, that our position to protect an unborn child is extremism. To me, extremism is a third trimester child being destroyed and protecting that. So what might be a priority for the metro districts, that's not the district that I represent. And I would be doing my district a disservice if I didn't stand up and let them know that, yes, I was an co-author to 5084, and anything I can do to stop a third trimester child all the way through birth from being destroyed, That's just, I'm sorry, that's unbelievable. A eagle's egg has more protection in the state of Minnesota than a third trimester child. It's just unbelievable. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm hearing a lot of discussion today about choices that Minnesotans have to make, about decisions that we make as Minnesotans. And I'm curious, I'm not going to ask anyone to yield to this, but I would encourage everyone who's listening to envision that neighbor you've never met and now realize that they're the one you're going to call whenever you need a doctor appointment because it's their opinion and their decision matters and their choice matters in how you and your family are going to approach health care. So I would agree, though, that choices do matter, and those choices belong to each one of us, to each one of our constituents, to each of their families. When we want to talk about control and who has control in this situation, there is no control that is any more local than each individual person deciding for themselves what happens to their body. And there were some remarks about democracy. I'm not aware of where the polling stations are for folks to decide how they might want to regulate my body, your body. My health is not up for election, neither is yours. Maybe if this bill was on the ballot, it would be, though. Our bodies are not open to democracy. The government and how we operate is open for democracy. But nobody outside of you gets to decide what happens to you. That's what apparently we should ask all Minnesotans is, do you believe that you have the right to tell your neighbor whatever they should do with their body? If we're not confident that we have choices in Minnesota, I have some good news. The good news is that right now in the state of Minnesota, every single person has the right to choose what's right for them. They have the right to reproductive health care, thanks to the good work of the Minnesota legislature in 2023. There is no better local control than you can get than what we have provided for Minnesotans through the PRO Act. If we are looking at this constitutional amendment that is proposed, I'm reading that, this wouldn't prohibit medical treatment necessary to preserve the health of a pregnant individual. And I'm just thinking about that pregnant individual, and at which point their story matters, and at which point their health care matters. It might not matter today. It might not matter because they're undocumented. And we're just gonna dehumanize that person. They don't have personhood on their own right now. But tomorrow, there's a conception that occurs in their body. Now, all of a sudden, we've decided that we care about undocumented people. And then the baby is born, and guess what? We no longer care about that child's parents to care for them. Still undocumented, not pregnant anymore. Good luck to you. Oh, and by the way, I'd also love to talk about removing funding for feeding your kid at school. Absolutely must bring this child to term, but if you're undocumented, we're going to turn your health care off when that kid comes here, and we don't care if they eat either. And I've heard a lot of really, really, really personal stories today. And that makes sense. because this is a very, very personal issue. These are personal decisions that do not belong in the hands of anyone in this room unless you are making decisions about your own body. And lastly, I'll say, there was mention too of throwing political bombs, and we can say whatever we want to say in the narrative of speaking to one another, but when Minnesotans follow the legislation that we write and introduce, and they do, because I get emails about things like this, and I have to reassure people that something this extreme is not going to pass through any committees. I have to reassure my constituents every day when we see bills like this that no, I promise you, we will defend your reproductive rights. This will not come to fruition, despite efforts from extreme politicians in Minnesota and across the nation. So is this a political bomb, back and forth? I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that this bill and bills like it are a political bomb on the rights of Minnesotans.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Gottfried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yeah, this is an intensely deep and personal issue that I know a lot of folks have deeply held convictions on and personal experiences with. And I am sorry to hear about the experience that Representative Schultz mentioned today. And what Representative Smith mentioned today. It's heartbreaking, especially if it is in a scenario where you deeply loved and wanted to carry that child and bring it forth. And so we do need to talk about this with the sensitivity that it deserves. I want to go back to yesterday. It was a discussion about one of the bills, and I believe it was Representative West said something that really struck with me that I think is applicable in this context. And he mentioned it on our provision to ban prediction markets here in the state. He said that just because we don't like it, we decide to ban them. That doesn't get rid of them, that just puts it in the shadows. It's true here too. If we ban something, it doesn't stop it, just puts it in the shadows. And that's what would happen if this provision, this constitutional amendment, passed. It wouldn't stop abortion. It wouldn't stop terminating a pregnancy. It would just put it in the shadows and make a whole lot of people a lot more unsafe. There's statistics to back this up too. I'm not just saying this out of nowhere. So couple of status points, statistical points, excuse me. Infant mortality on average in states that have abortion bans of this level, and even lesser, have a 11% higher infant mortality rate than states that don't have these bans in place. And probably one of the most extreme comparisons that we can kind of call upon is Texas, which has a near total abortion ban, similar to what would be in this particular law, has a maternal mortality rate 155% higher than in California. And so when we talk about these things, yes, we need to treat it sensitively. Yes, we need to share those personal stories, I think, as Representative Quam brought up, and I think those do have value. But we also need to look at the aggregate. We need to look at the totality of this and what it means for our society. And so I look at the language of this bill beyond just the statistical implications that it may have for both infant and maternal mortality rates within our state. And I look at the language itself, and I'm not convinced it provides the level of protection for folks that experience some of these exceptions that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle says it does. So, for example, if there is a right to life established, I would just ask if, I'm not asking anybody to yield or anything like that, but just it's something for us to consider. Can the mother be held liable for a miscarriage? Can the mother be held liable for using a substance or engaging in activities that cause a termination of a pregnancy or complicate a pregnancy to the point where it needs to be terminated if she did not know that she was pregnant? And this is very, very often the case when there are early on in pregnancies. You do not know that you're pregnant until later. And if there's a right to life established at the moment of conception, if that mother engaged in activities that complicated things to the point where that pregnancy needed to be terminated, could she be held liable under that? I think that's a question that needs to be asked. And, at the most extreme end of this, violation of this could be charged with murder. And it's important that we look at the bill language itself to have this nuanced discussion as we're talking about an incredibly sensitive topic, to see what the implications of this bill languages are. And I don't think that's clear under this. One other thing that I wanted to raise, say something like this does go through and we have a near total abortion ban within the state. I want to talk about what happens after that child is born in some specific circumstances. It's unfortunate, but we need to address the topic of rape within this context. And, among some of the fundamental rights that the Constitution, that are enumerated within our Constitution, are the rights of parents to raise their children. And while, it's never been interpreted as an absolute legal privilege, courts really have exercised wide discretion in preserving this right and have historically ignored the reality that not all parents are deserving of this right. I will say, even though the family law system does have some protections in place to terminate parental rights for atrocities like abuse, like domestic violence, it really largely ignores what I would call an uncomfortable area of parental origin, and that is parental rights regarding children conceived by rape. And that is another question that needs to be asked. If there is a child that is brought forth, is born as a product of rape, does the rapist have parental rights over that child? And in this particular bill, there is no exception for abortions for pregnancies that are caused by rape. And I ask these questions, again, I don't want to be insensitive, but I ask these questions because these questions must be asked when we are talking about a piece of legislation that has such broad, sweeping implications as this one does. There are a lot of feelings about this in this room, and I respect that. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations, not just because it's lobbing political bombs at each other or anything like that, as Chair Bennett said. But again, these are the sort of conversations that we need to be thinking about. These are the sort of questions that we need to be asking ourselves when we impose such a broad measure. And while I understand that the deeply held convictions on the other side of the aisle here may not view this as extreme, this as you put it, right to life, as extreme, what would be extreme is its application in law and the infringements on other rights that people have, and the huge amount of harm and unintended consequences that this sort of provision would have on our state, on the people in our state. And, I think every single one of us has a story that we could tell about a pregnancy that ended before we wanted it to. And I want to honor that space and hold the grief that there comes with that. And I will tell you, there are members of my family who have had abortions and have held a grief over that choice, especially if they were late and some complication arrived late into a pregnancy where they wanted to have that child. Anyway, I'm going to circle back to the beginning. There are a lot of things in the way that this bill is drafted that would leave huge amounts of unanswered questions within our state, within our society, that would have extreme impacts on the daily lives of people within our state. And I will reiterate what Representative West said in a slightly different context before I end this belabored speech, I should say. Just because we ban it does not mean that it will stop happening. It will just happen in the shadows, in a far less safe manner, in a way that harms far more people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Nobles, Representative Fogelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the reasons that I ran for office was to protect the right to life. Every single solitary baby that is conceived is a gift from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I am very proud to say that on this floor today. I have had 2 children they are now grown adults. I also had 2 miscarriages. So I know the loss of the babies and I know the joy of having a baby. The fact that the other side is saying that this is extreme is very hard to understand for me. Every child is a gift. And to punish a child because of bad choices just seems backwards to me. You would say you want bodily autonomy? Well, who is going to protect that child's bodily autonomy? That child is living and breathing, and it should be protected. I can't think of any greater thing that we can do on this floor today than to pass something like this for Minnesota. You talk about choices on the other side. This is a choice for our voters. This is why we come here, to let our voters have a voice. We are here for them, to advocate for them, and I'm going to advocate for the people in my district that constantly tell me how horrible it is that we have an extreme abortion policy in our state. Horrified that we can abort a child up to the day they are born. I do not know how anyone could do that with a clear conscience. So I hope today that we can look and say, we can assure our constituents that they can go to the ballot and vote on this. Then we can see how voters feel about the right to life. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You know, it's been interesting. I learned a lot from all of you in this chamber, and learned a lot from Representative Hollins yesterday about the way that this process works. And for the people of Minnesota, the way that I look at this bill, no matter how you feel about abortion, is this bill has not gone through any process. We did not ask for this bill to be on the floor. In fact, it was Democrats who asked for this bill, and they seem to care about it so much that half of them, maybe more, are gone for this really important debate that we're having on abortion or lack thereof, or what our policy is in Minnesota. You know, Representative Liebling, brought up a point, and, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm wondering if Representative Liebling would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Reimer.
Representative Liebling, you said that this bill would make criminals out of people, and I'm not sure in this process what people are you referencing when you say people?
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. So, because this bill says that if this was enacted, that every unborn child has a right to life, it means that if that life is ended, there would potentially be a murder charge. So in the stories that we've heard today, and thank you, I'm really glad you did ask this, and I think that Representative Gottfried touched on this, but I want to be very clear about it. Under this language, where you start out with the right to life in the Constitution, and then you have some exceptions, somebody has to decide whether those exceptions applied. So there would be a presumption that when a pregnancy is lost or an embryo is destroyed, that is a murder unless proven otherwise, that it is a homicide, I should say, unless proven otherwise. So we've heard some heartrending stories about miscarriages on this House floor. I know many of us have experienced them or our family members have. It's a heartbreaking thing. And now just imagine you went through that with your family, and then suddenly there's a knock at your door, and you're going to be questioned about, was that really a miscarriage? Or was that something else? Because presumptively, under this language, the loss of that pregnancy is, you have now somebody is lost who had the, quote, right to life, unquote. And so somebody could be asking one of these families that's grieving this unintended loss to prove it. That's the problem with this. That is a fundamental problem, and why this invades your privacy. That is the last thing a family needs when they lose a pregnancy that they wanted. Or even when they felt they had to abort a pregnancy that they wanted, which happens a fair amount, much more than we'd like to think, for whatever reason, because of the health of the mother, it then becomes that family's task to prove that they had a valid reason under the Constitution, because that fetus had a quote-unquote right to life. So that's what I'm saying. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Representative Reimer.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. No, you didn't, because I asked what type of person can get pregnant, and you all won't answer that, because women get pregnant. Moms get pregnant. And you won't say it, and I understand why. It's birthing people, and we want to make sure that we're inclusive in that language, but I think Minnesotans see through that. And it's interesting, because you brought up the right to life thing over and over again, and I think language is important in these bills. So even though this bill is unvetted, we haven't heard it in committee, and I think I'm probably a no on it because I am so pro-life that I think these types of bills should have their day that work through the process. But I think language is important, and it got brought up before. So we're talking about preborn child recognized to have a right to life. That's what this bill or this constitutional amendment is saying. And it was said before, but what 10 of you signed on to uses the exact same language, but for a different entity. So I just wanted to read that one more time. House File 3899 says that it is the policy of this state to recognize the inherent right to life of uncultivated rice to exist. So we can have the debate on whether a preborn child has inherent life or not. You believe they don't, we believe they do. But I think what most reasonable Minnesotans, and I hope you're listening, because we have one party who believes rice has a right to life and doesn't believe that human beings have a right to life. How backwards is this? I hope Minnesotans can recognize this farce for what it is. Right now, we have a bill on the table that has gone unvetted, that we as Republicans did not bring up on this floor, but Democrats wanted to bring it up even though it didn't get vetted. And it is the same party who believes that Rice has a right to life, but preborn children don't. So there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of discussion to be had about these specific types of issues. I think most Minnesotans want some kind of reasonable metric or some kind of reasonable constriction on abortion. I think we can have that conversation, but it's not going to happen here on this House floor with a half-baked bill that Republicans didn't want to bring up. And we're ready. I mean, again, we talked about working your way through the process. This bill did not do that. But I find it especially interesting that we're having on the merit of the bill, utilizing the same language, the inherent right to life. You guys think a vegetable has it, but preborn babies don't. So I'll be a no on this bill, and it's not because I'm not pro-life, but it's because we need to have a broader discussion about what Minnesotans want and how we can best represent them in this really difficult, weighty conversation. And I hope you'll give this bill the same consideration, or a bill in the future the same consideration, that we need to have a broader conversation about this issue. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to make just a couple points here about this bill. One is that women often don't know they're pregnant until much later, and sometimes they don't know at all. They might go to the bathroom, have a miscarriage, and not know that they had been pregnant. So that's very common. So to say that life begins at conception really doesn't factor in all these people who go to the bathroom and have a miscarriage. All these people who don't realize they're pregnant. So to make it a crime for our body to have a miscarriage like that is really extreme. The other point I want to make is, after hearing some of our members talk about how it's so easy, this is such an easy bill, and that Minnesotans need to have their voices heard. That this would give Minnesota the choice to protect life. Well, we've heard day after day that there is a bill hiding somewhere in a drawer that would do just that. That bill is Senate File 4067, and that bill alone would save many lives. That bill would address the gun violence we have seen in this state and in this country for years, most notably last summer, in June, July, and in August. So if you want to talk about protecting life, let's bring that bill to this House floor so that Minnesotans' voices can be heard here. I would hope that we'd agree that the lives of the children, the people who died last year, the Hortmans, that their lives should be protected too, right?
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're on a very important order of business. That is House File 5084, and I would ask that members stick to that point.
I remind the body that we are currently on a motion to suspend the rules on House File number 5084. If members could keep their comments aimed at that motion. Representative Ream.
Okay, well, I'm talking about protecting life, and that's, I think, what we're debating here. How do we best protect lives? How do we best protect our constituents' lives? And I'm going to make it fairly short today. I don't think we need to hear long speeches about a bill that's not going anywhere, that hasn't been vetted, hasn't gone through committees. But I do want to quote something from a pastor down in Birmingham, Alabama. and I'll make a few editorial changes to it, but it's about the unborn. The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated. Unlike the incarcerated, addicted, mentally ill, or the chronically poor, they don't resent your condescension or complain that you are not politically correct. Unlike widows, they don't ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, housing, universal school meals, or childcare. Unlike immigrants, they don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they are born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth, power, or privilege, without reimagining social structures, apologizing, or making reparations to anyone. They are, in short, the perfect people to love. If you want to claim you love Jesus, but actually dislike people who breathe. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the mentally ill, the poor, widows, orphans, all the groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they all get thrown under the bus for the unborn. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Todd, Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Schultz, for telling your story. My heart goes out to you and your wife. And I don't generally share personal stories. But you see, my wife and I experienced the same thing. And as a father of 9, it's extremely difficult to see my wife go through that and to not be able to do anything to change it. Just to be there to support her, love her, hold her hand, and bury that infant that didn't make it, knowing we could have had 10 in our family. It's not easy. But it means that every life is precious. But I'll share another story. One that my wife and I have never told anyone else. You see, when we found out that she was pregnant with one of our children, the doctor said, I think we need to have a test done here. He said there might be an issue. So they sent us to a specialist. And when we went in to meet with them, they asked a few questions. Asked if I was the father, asked the mother, asked how many kids we had, and said, when do you want to schedule the abortion? And I was shocked. What do you mean, schedule an abortion? They said, well, that's what you're here for, isn't it? I said, no. What's going on? Well, you already have this many kids. Why would you have another? So we made a call to the doctor instantly, very much in shock, disturbed by what had been said. And they said, well, we feel like there might be mental health issues. So we said, we're going home. We're going to go home right now. And if we have to take another test, we'll take another test. And we went home and we discussed what was going to happen, what we were going to do to prepare ourselves. Everybody wants a healthy, happy baby. But here's a choice, supposedly, because the choice wasn't if the baby was going to live or die. The choice was how were we going to arrange our lives to care for that child. And as we waited the weeks to get the test, it came back that that child had nothing wrong with it. The doctor chose to say that we should have an abortion and should kill that child because we had had too many already. If we had listened to that doctor, I would have killed one of my sons. That's what we're dealing with right now. And it makes me think of the value of life, as this bill did. Thank you, Representative Davis, for writing this. I'm proud to be an author of this bill. It's been mentioned before. Representative Jacobs, Bennett, wild rice. We're talking about giving that a right. Eagle eggs, turtle eggs. What has more value? That turtle egg or a human life? That wild rice or a human life? An animal or my son's life? I think it's very easy to see. And if we can't value human life, then what are we? If we're willing to put more value on an animal than we are a human, what does that say about us as a society? And you see, at one time, the Democrat Party actually used to be pro-life. My representative, when I was a kid growing up, was a Democrat in my area that was pro-life. How far the Democrat Party has gone. And then this bill, a constitutional amendment, which we talk about defending democracy all the time. What is more democratic than putting that up to the voters? They get to decide. You are basically silencing the voice of Minnesotans. Why do you fear that? There will come a time in our society when we will look back at these days and see how many innocents we have slaughtered. With the negative birth rates in our country, there will come a time when we will say, what have we done to our future generations? Thank you, Ben, for bringing this bill forward. And I hope that we do have a constitutional amendment in this state and that the voters decide, because that's what should be done. Thank you.
Recognize a member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. Quite frankly, I'm very, very happy and grateful to the Democrat Party for bringing this up on the floor today so that we can have this discussion. And to think that they would shame us or to make us feel bad that we want to ask for a constitutional amendment. Members, we've heard a lot of fear-mongering here today. We've heard a lot of what-ifs, but it's not what this bill is. The bill simply is a constitutional amendment which would be put on the ballot for the citizens of Minnesota to vote. That's it, folks. It's very interesting to me because 2022, the Minnesotans will remember advertisement after advertisement of this same fear and rhetoric. This is a party driven by abortion. Driven by the death of babies. And it's sad. I truly, truly feel sad for the Democrat Party. In 2023, after the Democrat trifecta, we came in here and HF1 was the Democrats' #1 priority. HF1. And when I talk to people in my district today, they still do not understand what that bill compromises. They do not understand to this day what the Democrat trifecta did to the state of Minnesota. HF1, no guardrails, no limits, abortion up to birth. And frankly, I guess they're proud of that. Abortion up to birth. Pro-choice voters disagree. Pro-choice voters absolutely disagree that abortion should be allowed up to 40 weeks. But the elected Democrats voted yes. Abortion up to birth. No limits. It is amusing to me that you think it's extreme that we are asking the citizens of Minnesota to decide. Because apparently the party, the pro-choice party, doesn't want to give you a choice. The pro-choice party is going to make all the decisions for you, Minnesota. There is no middle ground with this party. There's no purple in Minnesota anymore. It's their way or no way. You don't get to decide. They decided for you. Abortion up to 40 weeks. No guardrails. Abortion facilities not licensed. While that seems extreme, HF1 stripped parental consent for minors. Does that seem extreme, Minnesota? That seems a little extreme to me, especially in today when we have sex trafficking and we have minors going to have abortions with no parental consent. Seems pretty extreme to me. So the party that claims diversity, apparently you can't have diversity of thought. Apparently you can't have diversity of your own religious beliefs. So Minnesota, I am very, very grateful that we're having this conversation today because by far, most Minnesotans feel that the Democrat Party, the elected Democrat Party, have taken this state way too far to the left, way too radical. They stripped away reporting. Let's go on. HF1. Why would they strip away the reporting? So now we don't even know how many abortions are being performed. Seems kind of extreme, doesn't it? And to Representative Ream, who is not here anymore, it was very interesting when she's referring to the unborn, and then she said, and when they are born, we can forget about them. The public should ask the elected Democrats if that's what they mean when they stripped away the Born Alive bill, because that's what they did. And they forgot about our babies who survived, to be left to put aside, to die. So yes, Minnesota, I am happy to have this conversation all day long, and I am very, very proud to have my name on that bill. Because you know what? Minnesotans disagree with the elected Democrats and how far left they have taken this state and radicalized us. Minnesotans disagree. We do not want to be the most radical state in the nation on abortion. And actually, I trust the citizens of Minnesota. I trust them to put it on a ballot to allow them to vote.
I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm thankful that we brought this bill forward, or this urgency. Many of my colleagues have spoken and spoken very well, and I appreciate, again, bringing this forward. I'm honored to be an author on this bill. And one of the things that I ran on is to end abortion. I think it's disgusting, and it's vile, and it is murder. Moving forward with this gives Minnesotans an option. As Representative Altendorf pointed out very well, it gives Minnesotans a choice. So what are we afraid of? Let's give them that choice. Let's have their voice be heard. I grew up in Minnesota, and I'm proud to be a Minnesotan, but that's changed over the years. We used to be known as the land of 10,000 lakes. Now we're a laughingstock in many ways, whether it's fraud or now we're known as the land of 12,000 plus abortions every year and rising, because one party wants to push that narrative and continue the practice of ending the lives of the most vulnerable people in our society. And so I am absolutely happy and excited that they brought this forward. I hope we're going to get the votes that we need to pass this and give Minnesotans the choice so they can have their voice be heard.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I've had a lot of accusations thrown at me during this time, and that's okay. It's a very extreme bill, I was told, over and over and over. So Minnesota, I guess I'm on trial before you. You decide if I'm extreme or not, because that's what I'm trying to do here, is let you decide on this issue. You see, this is a constitutional amendment where you, the people, decide. So I'll read it for you. An amendment to the Minnesota Constitution is proposed to the people. A preborn child has the right to life. A preborn child has the right to life. This section does not prohibit the provision of medical treatment necessary to save the life or preserve the health of a pregnant individual, or the removal of a non-viable or deceased preborn child, including in cases of miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. So I just read it to you. You can now see that there were many false accusations made about this bill just by simply reading it. There's probably no subject dearer to my heart than protecting innocent life. It's no secret I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. And I love him with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. Proverbs 31:8, I'm about to really bare my heart with you. Open your mouth for the speechless and the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and the needy. And to me, I can't think of someone more speechless than a human being in the womb who's robbed of their choice, who's robbed of their bodily autonomy, to me, they matter. I wasn't always a Christian. At 24 years of age, I had become so sick and tired of my life. And I was such a terrible person, and my wife was ready to divorce me, and I was an atheist. That was me. I was an atheist, and I got so depressed at times I'd just stare out the window. And a little bit earlier, before my wife and I got married, she had become pregnant, and I went to her and I asked her if she would be willing to get an abortion. That was me. And I thank God that she said no. Sorry, but this matters to me. This isn't a political issue for me. I am who I am. My district sent me here to represent them, and I was very clear and honest with them about what I believe. And they sent me here with an overwhelming response. This isn't political for me. This is life and death, and this is about the life of human beings. I gave my life to Jesus Christ at the age of 24 in a warehouse without reading a lick of the Bible, and I got filled with the Holy Spirit of God. That happened, and it changed my life. And it was God Almighty who revealed to me how important this issue is. And I make no apology for him or for who I've become. So Minnesota, you decide if that's extreme. That's just my story. That's what happened to me. And now I fight for those human beings, those little baby boy and baby girls. I fight for their bodily autonomy. I fight for their freedom of thought and the freedom to be able to one day maybe stand on this House floor and speak. But you see, we each only get one chance, one life, one spirit. One. And someone else makes that choice for them to snuff out their life forever, never even having a chance to fulfill their God-given destiny. Done. Over. Never to have that chance again. Minnesota is that extreme. Because I remember during the Democrat trifecta, when abortion was passed on this floor up to birth and arguably after, there was cheering and giddiness on the other side of the aisle. So I'll let you decide if that's extreme or not. They went home cheering for abortion up to birth and arguably beyond. And I left here in tears along with many of my companions. You decide if that's extreme or not. And I will tell you that these Democrats down here in St. Paul, they wouldn't even vote to stop post-birth abortions. That is a fact. You can go back and watch the tape yourself because it's archived. You tell me who's extreme. This is a conversation worth having, Minnesota, and I wanted to bring the conversation directly to you, the people, because a constitutional amendment lets you decide. God, thank you. Help us all to have a heart of compassion. And help us to have your perspective, heaven's perspective. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I recognize the maker of the motion, the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We heard yesterday that bills matter, that the bills that you sign on to matter, that the bills you introduce matter. And just a reminder about how extreme this bill is. Before you even know you're pregnant from fertilization, this would institute criminal penalties for doctors, criminal penalties for those seeking medical care, with no exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest. Minnesotans have been told time and again that they don't have to worry, that their abortion rights are protected, that we have a Supreme Court decision that is in place. This bill is trying to undo that. And this vote will show Minnesotans who is on the side of criminalizing Minnesotans for seeking medical care and who is on the side of reproductive rights. Please vote no.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the motion to suspend the rules to bring up 5084. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Hudson. Hudson. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no. Rarick.
Go.
Rarick, aye.
Rarick votes aye. Hudson.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 52 yeas and 71 nays, the motion to suspend the rules does not prevail.